Aliens had advanced tech. Humans had something better. The Galactic Council had seen thousands of species rise and fall across the cosmos. They had watched civilizations harness the power of stars, bend space-time to their will, and upload their consciousness into eternal digital paradises. But humans? Humans were different, and that difference would save the galaxy. Commander Zex'thor of the Andraxian Empire stood before the holographic display, his 4 eyes narrowing in confusion. The data made no sense. According to every metric they possessed, humans should have been extinct 3 cycles ago. "Explain this to me again," he demanded, his translator belt converting his clicks and hisses into standard Galactic. "The human fleet lost 60% of their vessels in the Battle of Kepler-7? His tactical officer, a crystalline being named Resonance, flickered with embarrassment. "Yes, Commander. Our projections gave them a 0.3% chance of survival. And yet they won, sir, decisively." Zex'thor slammed his appendage on the console. This was the 3rd time this month. The humans kept defying every logical prediction. Their technology was primitive compared to the Andraxians. Their ships were slower, their weapons less powerful, their armor weaker. By all accounts, they should have been easy prey. But they weren't. The war had started 6 months ago when the Andraxian Empire had made a calculated decision to incorporate Earth into their territory. It wasn't personal. The Andraxians were a logical species, driven by efficiency and mathematical certainty. Earth occupied a strategic position in the galaxy, and humans possessed rare genetic markers that would prove useful for their biological archives. The initial invasion fleet had been modest, 17 battlecruisers, each one capable of glassing a continent. The Andraxians had faced species far more advanced than humans and absorbed them all. This would be routine. The fleet never returned. When the second wave arrived, larger and more prepared, they found the wreckage of the first fleet scattered across Earth's solar system, and waiting for them was a ragtag collection of human vessels that looked like they'd been assembled in someone's garage, which, in many cases, they had been. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHSF Indomitable, a destroyer that had seen better days. Hell, it had seen better decades. The ship groaned and rattled with every maneuver. The artificial gravity occasionally hiccuped, and there was a persistent smell of burned wiring that no one had been able to locate for 3 years. "Captain, we've got 17 Andraxian fighters incoming. Our shields are at 40%. Chen didn't even blink. "How many missiles do we have left?" "4, ma'am."
"Perfect. That's 4 more than we need." She turned to her weapons officer. "Rodriguez, you remember that move we pulled at Titan?" Rodriguez grinned. "The stooping one that shouldn't have worked? That's the one." What the Andraxians didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that human tactics weren't based on logic. They were based on something far more unpredictable and far more dangerous: desperation married to creativity. The Andraxians calculated probability. Humans calculated possibility. When the Andraxian fighters closed in, following their optimal attack pattern as dictated by 10,000 years of military doctrine, the Indomitable did something no sane species would do. It vented its entire starboard fuel reserve, creating a cloud of volatile gas, then fired its 4 remaining missiles straight up. The Andraxian pilots recalculated their approach. The missiles posed minimal threat given their trajectory. They continued their attack run. Chen counted down in her head. 3, 2, 1, now. The Indomitable's point defense cannons, which the Andraxians had dismissed as too primitive to worry about, opened fire. Not at the fighters, at their own missiles, at the precise moment they reached the center of the fuel cloud. The explosion that followed wasn't just big, it was biblical. The kind of explosion that made nearby stars take notice. When the light cleared, all 17 Andraxian fighters were gone. So was most of the Indomitable's starboard hull, but Chen had already calculated they wouldn't need it. "Ma'am, we're venting atmosphere on decks 3 through 7. "Seal them off. How's our engine?" "Somehow still working, ma'am." "Then we're not done yet." Back on the Andraxian flagship, Zex'thor was reviewing the data from the engagement. His mind, capable of processing millions of calculations per second, kept reaching the same conclusion. This was impossible.
They destroyed their own missiles, he said slowly, as if speaking the words would make them make sense. They destroyed their own missiles to create a larger explosion. They damaged their own ship intentionally. Resonance pulsed with confusion. It violates every principle of combat efficiency. It does more than that. It violates logic itself. Zex'thor paused. How many ships have we lost to these tactics? 47, Commander. And how many times have we successfully predicted their strategy? Resonance dimmed with shame. Never, sir. Zex'thor made a decision. Get me a communication link to the human command. I need to understand what we're dealing with.
2 hours later, Zex'thor found himself in a virtual conference with Admiral Marcus Webb, the commander of Earth's defense fleet. The human looked tired. His uniform was rumpled. There was what appeared to be coffee stains on his collar. By Andraxian standards, he was the picture of unprofessionalism. Admiral Webb, I am Commander Zex'thor of the Andraxian Empire. I am contacting you to discuss terms of engagement. Webb leaned back in his chair. You mean surrender? No, I mean understanding. Your species continues to defeat forces that are technologically and numerically superior. This should be impossible. We calculate every scenario, every probability, and yet you continue to survive. How? Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. You really want to know? I do. You calculate. We improvise. You follow doctrine. We make it up as we go. You know what you're going to do 5 moves ahead. We barely know what we're doing right now. Webb leaned forward. Commander, you fight wars like they're chess matches. We fight wars like they're bar brawls. And in a bar brawl, the guy who follows the rules usually loses. But that is inefficient. That is illogical. That is
Effective? Webb interrupted. Yeah, it is. You know what your biggest weakness is, Commander? You think there's a right way to fight a war. There isn't. There's only the way that works. And sometimes the way that works is strapping engines to an asteroid and crashing it into your flagship. Sometimes it's filling a cargo ship with nuclear waste and detonating it in the middle of your formation. Sometimes it's having my ships broadcast Earth's worst music at your crews until their morale breaks. Zex'thor's translator struggled with some of these concepts. You would sacrifice resources inefficiently just to create an unexpected result? Every single time. But what about your losses, your casualties? Do you not calculate the cost? Webb's smile disappeared. Of course we do. We calculate every lost ship, every dead crew member, every family that gets a folded flag and a letter. We calculate it all. The difference is, we don't let those calculations stop us. We let them fuel us. That is crazy, stupid, illogical? Webb shrugged. Probably all of those. But it's also human. And it's why you're not going to win this war. The conversation ended shortly after. Zex'thor sat in silence, processing what he'd learned. His tactical computer had already run projections based on the new data. The results were disturbing.
If humans were truly unpredictable, if they operated outside logical parameters, then no amount of superior technology could guarantee victory. In fact, the more advanced the Andraxian forces became, the more predictable they were. And predictability, it turned out, was a fatal weakness. 3 weeks later, the tide of the war shifted dramatically. The Andraxians had committed their full fleet to a decisive battle at the Proxima system. Every calculation suggested this would be the end of human resistance. They outnumbered the human fleet 10-1. Their ships were faster, stronger, better armed. They should have won easily. Captain Chen, now commanding a small flotilla of destroyers, looked at the massive Andraxian fleet and did what any logical person would consider insane. She ordered her ships to charge straight at them. No evasive maneuvers, no tactical positioning, just full throttle, straight ahead. The Andraxian commanders were baffled. Was this a suicide run? Some kind of new weapon? They ran probability analyses, searched for the hidden strategy. There wasn't one. Chen's flotilla smashed into the Andraxian formation like a wrecking ball. Ships collided, explosions rippled through both fleets. It was chaos. It was madness.
It was exactly what the rest of the human fleet needed. While the Andraxians were focused on the seemingly suicidal charge, Admiral Webb brought the main human force in from an asteroid field, engines cold, drifting like debris. By the time the Andraxians detected them, it was too late. The Battle of Proxima lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Andraxian fleet was in full retreat. They had lost their flagship, 3 command carriers, and their strategic momentum. But more importantly, they had lost something else: their certainty. Commander Zex'thor survived the battle, barely. As his damaged ship limped back to Andraxian space, he composed a report for the High Council. It was the hardest thing he'd ever written. The humans cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. They do not fight to win, they fight to survive. And something that fights to survive will do anything, sacrifice anything, risk anything. They turn their weaknesses into weapons and their desperation into strategy. We calculated that we were superior. We were wrong. Not because our technology is inferior, not because our tactics are flawed, but because we assumed war was a science. The humans have shown us that war is an art, and in art, there are no rules. The High Council debated for 3 cycles. Finally, they reached a decision. For the first time in their history, the Andraxian Empire sued for peace. When the treaty was signed, Admiral Webb met Commander Zex'thor in person on a neutral station. The Andraxian commander had to ask one final question.
Admiral, during our conversation, you said humans make things up as they go. Was that true, or was it all part of some greater strategy? Webb laughed. You want to know if we were bluffing? If all those crazy tactics were actually calculated moves? Yes. Webb thought about it. Honestly, about half the time we had no idea what we were doing. The other half we were just hoping we'd survive long enough to figure it out. That charge at Proxima, Captain Chen's engine was damaged. She couldn't maneuver properly, so she just pointed her ship straight ahead and hit the throttle. Zex'thor's eyes widened. But that means we won one of the most important battles in the war because of a mechanical failure and a captain who was too stubborn to admit she was beaten. Webb extended his hand. Welcome to humanity, Commander, where our greatest strength is that we're too stupid to know when we're supposed to lose. Zex'thor stared at the extended hand. Then, slowly, he reached out and shook it. In that moment, he understood something profound. The galaxy was full of species with advanced technology, superior intellect, and logical minds. But there was only one species crazy enough to fight wars with broken ships, impossible odds, and nothing but sheer determination.
The Andraxians had advanced tech. The humans had something better. They had the will to keep fighting long after logic said they should quit. They had the creativity to turn every disadvantage into an advantage. They had the audacity to look at impossible situations and ask, but what if? 6 months later, when the Zorgoth Collective invaded from beyond the Galactic Rim with technology that made the Andraxians look primitive, the Galactic Council had a decision to make. Every calculation, every simulation, every analysis said the Zorgoth were unstoppable. The Council unanimously voted to do the only logical thing. They called the humans. Because sometimes the best weapon isn't the most advanced one. Sometimes the best weapon is the one crazy enough to believe it can win when everyone else has already accepted defeat. And in a universe full of logical species, humanity's illogic was the most powerful force of all.